Dit kan niet. Ja, dan gaan we staan.
Nee, we willen staan.
Can I sit here? No.
Ik heb mijn tasje daar.
You were expecting the program to start at 12, but then you will always see that everybody starts coming in between 12 and 12:15, so that's why we decided to start exactly at 12:15. But welcome here at the kickoff of the Urban Greenhouse Challenge 2019-2020. My name is Simone Ritzer and I work here at the university, at Wageningen University and Research, and I help here to coordinate everybody, all the speakers to connect. But you're all challenged to design an iconic circular greenhouse in the city of Dongguan in China. And I'm wondering who's here in the room. Are I heard that there are already 110 students who registered from all over the world, both here in the room, but it's a full room, but also on the television. So let's all wave in that direction because there's a lot of people also online joining. And I don't know how many of you already registered. How many of you belong to the 110 students who are already in a team participating? Okay, let's say 30% of you. Who doesn't have a team yet but wants to participate? Okay, raise your hand higher because then the people in teams can see that you're looking still for some partners. But there will be time during lunch as well for that. Who's here? I see a lot also, some people a little bit more mature, so they must be partners or coaches or companies helping you around. Can I see your hands? Okay, also take a good look at these people because you're gonna need them. Or they might gonna need you because they're always looking for new, enthusiastic, smart, bright, young people to work at their companies. So also take a close look at the students. So we know kind of who are here, but indeed what I said, there's also other guests. There's people joining via the live stream. So all over the world, there's people from different universities in the US and in China as well, already joining in teams. So you're competing to teams all around the world. There is also people, I think, from the Ferti Farm workshop here today. Can I see some hands who are there? Okay, might also be good coaches. Then for, well, we know who is here in the room, but here in the front row, we have some special guests. And the first of you is the Rector Magnificus of Wageningen University of Research, who's going to welcome all of you on behalf of the university. Can I have a warm applause for Rector Magnificus, Professor Arthur Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here because I think this is really the most important thing what's happening on our campus. Student challenges. I think we started with it about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, with indeed the first Urban Greenhouse Challenge, which was located in Amsterdam, so designing a greenhouse in an urban area in Amsterdam. So now we're moving up to China. In between we have done another one on the protein transition. We're also doing one on food for new food systems for the army, so to say. So they need special kind of food. So we also do a challenge on that. So the whole idea of learning via challenges is new, but it's extremely interesting. Because you can learn a lot. Because you have a real world problem. You have people who are extremely interested in what comes out of that. You have all kinds of coaches. You have an actual situation. You have multidisciplinary teams. You are under time pressure. You have also some budget which you can use, and you get a lot of information also. And also this time you get a lot of information from a special case in China of a city which I will not repeat because the name is too difficult. Actually, the incident was that this morning I was in another premise of Wageningen University in Bleiswijk, where we have our main horticulture center, so a lot of greenhouses, and I was receiving there the mayor of Beijing, Chen Jining, which is an old friend of mine, and he was coming here to look at how in the Netherlands greenhouses and other agricultural systems were being developed, etc. And I told him also about this challenge which is taking place, and he was extremely interested, and especially of course in the outcome, but also in the process of using challenges to have a learning process. Because one of the main, I think, ideas and the benefits of challenge is that it's a complete new way of learning. It's also a complete new way of developing talents of young students. And I think the second main issue of these challenges is that it is a great way to reach innovations. And in this case, of course, innovations in urban greenhouses. in urban agriculture, where it's not only about the production of food, of course, although that's a major element. How can you produce in cities for the people of the cities? But it's also on a lot of other things which these greenhouses can do, in terms of community building, in terms of engaging people in food production and learning them what it is to produce food, in building a neighborhood which is much more livable, so to say. So there are also a lot of side effects of, if you want to say it like that, of these urban challenges, urban greenhouse challenges. And I think that makes it also very interesting. So that's also why we don't need just technical people who know how plants are growing or know how to design a structure of a greenhouse, but we also need people who are very good in setting up community development programs. People who know the economics of all this. People who are also from all kinds of other disciplines. And I think that makes the learning experience extremely nice and interesting. Why now a challenge on urban greenhouses? So why not on another one? Because of course I remember that the first challenge on urban greenhouses was called the ultimate urban greenhouse. So that said that maybe that's already finished, that job, but of course it's never finished. We are constantly innovating these greenhouses. And developing an urban greenhouse for a second in Amsterdam is completely different from doing that in a Chinese city. And we know indeed that the issue of food is extremely important in all kinds of cases. There are increasingly people moving into cities. They need to be fed, and we know the further away the food is coming from, the more likely it is that it has a negative ecological footprint. So it can have a lot of ecological benefit if you really do that within cities rather than far away from cities. So that's also what we are going to look into that in those urban greenhouses. I was only given 5 minutes, so I'll stop now. I already see it here, the winkering. But I do not do that before mentioning a few people, especially which I would like to really welcome very much. First, of course, are the partners for this urban greenhouse challenge. There are quite a number of partners which are supporting this challenge. It's the Rabobank, which will speak in a moment also. They have a representative here. It's the University Fund Wageningen, which is also financially supporting that. The Wageningen Ambassador, which is a group of alumni which are now the ambassadors of our university. Priva, which is a major company in constructing greenhouses. Lens and Slingerland Potgrond, so they are looking for the material where you grow in plants, soils. Syngenta, which is also a major company. And ISHS, which is the International Society for Horticulture Sciences. So they are also very welcome here. Second, of course, very welcome is even more important, are of course the students who are going to do that. So actually face-to-face live here, but of course also who are there via the internet looking at us. There's also a special welcome to 3 people who are in the jury. So they are extremely important, so you better make already friends with them. Tiffany Tsu is here, she will also speak in a moment. So wink with her, try to make eye contact, and gives you additional points. Cindy van Rijswijk from Rabobank. Oh, sorry, Tiffany is of course from UGHC. She will explain that later. And of course also Professor Chijiang Yang is here, and he's also a jury member. So those are important people. They will judge in a number of phases, because we have selection moments, as you know, during the process. They will in the end judge what is the most innovative, new, promising design for this greenhouse. And we have of course a company which is in China, which is also promising that this design will be taken very seriously and made into a real case if it's promising enough. So that's also the nice thing of a challenge. It's not just learning something and then forgetting it, but learning something and actually contributing to have an impact. And that's, I think, also what we at Wageningen University always like, to have a learning process where in the end you also have an impact. Okay, I leave it with that. I wish you all a lot of success. Do indeed, for those who have not done, sign in. We have already people from 80 universities around the world who have signed in, so it's really going to be a very international competition. and that's only nice. So then it's also an element of networking which contributes to that. I'll stop there. You're very happy for that, Madam Chairman. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Exactly in time, so very nice done. So all of you, I'm going to test you a little bit before all these presentations are going to start to see how much you already know of this city of Don Juan. Because the Netherlands has a population density of about 300, 400, well, a little bit over 400 people per square kilometers. And now I'm curious, who knows how many people per square kilometers live in Don Juan, the city where you're going to develop this urban greenhouse for? Who has any idea? Is it 3 times bigger? Because it's bigger. They really need an urban greenhouse, probably going vertical up in the air. So it's at least 3 times bigger. Who thinks it's 4 times bigger? No one thinks it's 4 times bigger? Okay, some people think it's 4 times bigger. 5? We're just going up. Who thinks it's more than 4 times bigger? 5 times bigger. 6, 7, 8. Okay, 8. Do you know, the 2 of you? Do you have any idea how many people?
I would say 10.
10 times bigger? It's almost 10 times bigger. It's almost 10 times bigger. It's about 8 times bigger. It's 3,300 people per square kilometers. So there's quite a challenge. Here in the Netherlands we have enough space, you would say, than when you compare to Don Juan. So there's a challenge. Just a little bit of challenging. If you want some good members who have an idea, you saw the 2 of them were very close. So use them in your teams. Now we're going to the first speaker of today. We first have 2 speakers and there will be a panel discussion afterwards. And there's plenty of room for questions, both for all of you here and the people who are joining on the live stream. The first speaker is Senior Industry Analyst of Fresh Products at Rabobank. She focuses on the complete supply chain, so from the growing position to the consumer. And also taking a look at that whole supply chain when judging you, because she is what Artemo already said, one of the jury members. Can I please have a warm welcome to Cindy van Rijswijk. Yeah, and the microphone is, I'm sorry. Here you go. Okay, thank you.
So today I'm going to talk about Back to the Future. When I was about 10 or 9 years old, this was a very famous movie. Maybe some of you remember or don't. It's a long time ago. But I think a lot of developments we see happening now in horticulture are sometimes a step back into the past and sometimes are really a step forward into the future. So, but I will explain later about this. My name is Cindy, I work for Rabobank and we are really proud to be a partner and sponsor in this big event. I think it's a great opportunity for our students to participate in a challenge like this. When I was a student, there were none of these challenges. We just had books, had to study. I remember first time that I went to university, I got a little piece of paper and they told me, this is your email address, and nobody knew what it was actually. So we tried, and the only people that could email to each other were our own student group, so that was not really exciting. So I think it's wonderful to have these projects for people from all over the world. It's really, really great. So as Simone already told, I work for the Rabo Research Group, so we support Rabobank in its banking activities in the Netherlands, but also abroad in different parts of the world. So, and this is a very simplified picture of the current supply chain in fresh produce, mainly fruit and vegetables. You have input companies, a lot of small farmers, cooperatives, companies doing packaging, exporting everything, and then it ends up in retail, food service, and eventually at the consumer. And this supply chain is now changing drastically. both on the production side and consumption side, and I try to discuss some of these changes in 10 minutes. So you will look at urban farming mainly. I want to take it a little bit into broader perspective today, because you're gonna learn a lot about that already, or maybe you did already in your preparation. So looking at the consumer, I think there's two developments that are really big drivers of these changes, and this is urbanization and also digitization. So consumers now have the possibility to get food delivered, ready meals delivered, groceries delivered. They will have, in a few years, they will have personal apps that will guide them in the food choices they have. And also in an urbanized situation, there's many people now that don't have kitchens even, so they don't even have the opportunity to prepare their own food. So that will bring a lot of changes, I think, especially in the big cities in Asian countries like China. So what we see is a lot of new businesses popping up, which is really interesting. A few years ago, especially in Europe, the retail space was dominated by only a few big supermarket chains, and now there's a whole new businesses popping up. So deliveries of ready-to-eat meals, ready-to-eat meals, meal kit deliveries, tech giants like Alibaba, Amazon that come into the food space, and this is bringing a lot of dynamics. And essentially what is changing is that food is not just food, food is increasingly becoming a service itself. What we also see, and it was mentioned by Mr. Mol already, that greening of cities, that is, I think, a really big opportunity also for the horticulture chain. I personally believe that there will be a major demand for plants and trees in big cities. In decades we tried to move all the greens out of the city, and now luckily people realize that we have to get them in again. For different reasons. I think climate change will be very important, but also the well-being of people, etc. What development do we see in fresh produce consumption? This is not really spectacular. If we talk about volume growth in consumption of fruit and vegetables, in Europe and also North America, we see about 1% growth a year. So this is more or less the same as population growth. In the emerging markets, in Asia, we see about 3-4% growth a year. But this is volume. We see that growth in value is outpacing volume growth because people want something different. They want products that look nice, that taste different. They want to have snacks, convenience food, all kind of products that are more expensive than traditional fruit and veggies like cabbages, carrots, potatoes. And I think especially the importance of convenience products cannot be overstated. So these data are from the US market. In many other markets all over the world, we see a similar development. People really like to spend money on value-added vegetables. So fresh cut vegetables, meal kits, salads, all kind of convenience foods. And organic is, especially in the US, also still growing very fast. In Europe, growth is a little bit slower, but outpacing conventional vegetable growth. Another trend that we see is local production. So this is a major trend, and it also, local products generally also receive a higher price than imported products, even if the product is completely the same. This happens, for example, in Germany. German tomatoes are priced much higher than Dutch tomatoes. And at the same time, I think that this local trend will not lead to local production only. Because if we look at the actual figures of supermarket sales, these are very popular products, things like berries, avocados, snack tomatoes and tomatoes, okay, we can produce year-round, nearly everywhere in the world, but avocados can only be produced in few regions. Same for big popular products like bananas. So people that are telling me I only buy local, they are just lying. I think everybody likes to eat a banana. And I don't think it makes sense to grow them locally in a greenhouse or something. So I strongly believe that we will also trade in the future. We will not produce everything local. And trade can also become more sustainable. There are different ways for transportation and also more sustainable ways than currently is the case. This supply chain I was showing in the beginning is changing fast, not only in markets like Europe and the US, but also in China. This is an example of the current or traditional way that the fruit supply chain works in China. And it doesn't show all the players, but there's a lot of steps in between farmer and consumer, a lot of local people buying it and selling it to other wholesalers, and again selling it to another wholesaler. And it ends up with a price that is about 8 times as high as the price the farmer receives. So there's a lot of markup in the supply chain. But what has happened when companies like Alibaba entered the fresh fruit space and started selling directly and buying directly from growers? This has really changed the supply chain, and they can also finance those growers. They can give them data and receive data from the farmers, making the supply chain much more efficient. And currently they are able to sell the product with a 5 times markup. It's still a lot, I think, could be more efficient, but okay, China is a major country, of course. Logistics are still quite complicated. But I think this is showing that, that when a company like Alibaba steps in, it can really disrupt the traditional chain. At the same time, farmers are really challenged, I believe, and there's a lot of things that they have to cope with. Of course, the extreme climate, extreme weather circumstances, pests that are also related to that. Availability of labor is a big problem in many parts of the world. Food safety, geopolitics, very topical issue, I think, with Brexit, all the trade wars that Trump is starting. Competition is always a challenge, I think, for producers that cannot really influence the price, or often not, and sustainability issues. So it's a lot that farmers have to deal with, and the list of sustainability issues is long. It's just a few mentioned on this slide. I will not discuss them into detail. I think this is a very important development, that we see people moving out of the field and machines and robots moving into the field or greenhouse. So I think in a few decades the fields will be completely free of people. They will do the work mainly from outside of the field, controlled by computers, machines, etc. Climate change, I mentioned already, has an impact in various ways, but I'm not that negative about climate change. There are a lot of risk countries, high-risk countries. There are illustrated on this map, but I think there's also many real ways that farmers can cope with this. I think more and more farmers have to gain control over production. So one way to do this is indoor farming, but they can also start doing it in a simple way. A real life example is that we finance a lot of apple farmers. They all start to use hail nets, and this is not only because of the risk of hailstorms, but also because retailers really like this. They have more consistent production. Actually, indoor growing is Indoor production is growing very fast globally, about 5% a year. This includes more low-tech structures, plastic tunnels, etc., but also high-tech structures, glass houses, and vertical farming. So most of the indoor growing is still plastic farms, about 90%. Glass houses is 10%, and urban or indoor farming is less than 1%. So these are more or less the current figures on indoor growing. But I think modernization is inevitable, so it has a lot of advantages. We see this, for example, in strawberry cultivation. In some countries it's still in the open field, but in many countries farmers moved into plastic tunnels, in other countries into glass houses, and there's also some vertical farms already producing strawberries. So because of sustainability, consistency, quality, etc. And as a bank, we also look at, of course, at the cost and the risks of this. The main disadvantage is that it requires a lot of capital if you move up in your production system. So I think that's the main disadvantage. And also variable costs can be quite high. I think it's really important that companies that have a more advanced production system also have the marketing side well organized. This is sometimes what is missing. People think from a technology side, this works great, but if you don't sell the products at the right price, the project will never succeed. The funny thing is that there is so much new technology and new production systems, and I think all the urban greenhouse challenge teams will come up with the most futuristic, fantastic designs, but at the same time there's also a step back to permaculture, more ecological system farming. I find that personally quite funny that these developments are happening at the same time. But I think, I had discussions with people, what is the direction we are going to? Are we going back to these more old-style mixed farms, ecological style farming, or are we going to the more futuristic indoor farming style? I think, it can be both, depending on the local climate, local markets, your capital, your inputs. I think both systems and everything in between will be the future, but I think all of the system will use more technology, data, etc. I think that's just no question anymore, and it can help, I think, all farmers dealing with the challenges that I've mentioned. So a lot of interesting things going on in the supply chain from my view, and a lot of opportunities because of the urbanization and technological trends. I'm very curious to see what the students during the challenge will come up with and how they will surprise me also with successful business models. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Well, I think that was clear. It's actually very interesting to hear, as I'm the coordinator of the Wageningen Dialogues program, and it's very interesting to see how she also mentioned that there's kind of this dialogue or debate going on the technological side and more the permaculture or biological side. So for who's interested in that, there's an interesting book written by Charles Mann on the wizards and the prophets. And I think it's also very interesting to have that conversation going on within your group, because there might be different visions on that. So this was the whole supply chain and the dialogue going on that. And the second speaker who I'm going to introduce to you is the Director of Strategic Developments in China for the Dutch Greenhouse Delta. She's also focusing on business models and innovation, especially always that focus on what's happening in China as an emerging market. She was a product developer, product manager for also large-scale innovative projects on mega cities and ecosystem, the food supply systems in China. And as well, executive board member of Vertical Farm Institute, who is also one of the partners of the Greenhouse Challenge. Can I have a warm welcome for Tiffany Tsui? Yeah.
Thank you and welcome. I'm very honored and very excited to be here today. I give also frequent presentations to business communities, government, but this is a lot more nervous for me because I'm talking to young people from around the world, and you are unhindered by any past knowledge, by any burden. So you have innovative ideas, you're critical. So I'm really looking forward to all innovations coming from around the world. Another reason I'm excited is I was project director for, let's say, integral, large, complex project in China, eco-cities, green buildings, large food clusters. My very first agro park, so integral planning, was in 2011, and together with a team of Bach University and then with planner, architects, economists, energy people. We have 30 people working in China and Beijing to look at how do you bring large leapfrogging systems to the Chinese agriculture system. So that also sets a path for me in the last 10 years to focus on what makes system changes in bridging rural and urban development, greening issues, energy, water, value chain, but also entrepreneurship ecosystem. So, can I just press this? So let's start with some excitement.
In 2050, over 9 billion people need to be fed. Do you want to make a difference? Solve global food problems and keep innovating in sustainable solutions. Because creating healthy food for the future of our world starts today. Joy for what?
This film shows also the different elements when we're talking about food clusters or food production. It's trade, it's urban development, it's water, but also the more community development, permaculture, green roofs. So it's not a one-dimensional issue of just production, bringing production supply to demand, where government consumers. Increasingly, we're really talking about the intersection of multiple disciplinaries. So as a strategic researcher and author, I'm right now finishing a study called the Green Cities for the Dutch government enterprise agency and Beijing embassy. In this study, I looked at the interlinking elements in green cities, which is a very broad concept, which includes green buildings, so energy efficiency, indoor air quality, spawn cities, very big topic in the last 5 years in China, on water management in cities. And also, of course, what the senior already explained, with food logistics, new retail chains, e-commerce, the new way of working and living for people. So it comes down to what happens in the food sector, whether it's vertical farming or metropolitan farming, or you can say the traditional greenhouse production and the new revolutionary way of indoor growing. So the study was not meant to develop a new standard, what is green cities, because there is no standard. But it's as a strategic roadmap to position the Dutch sectors for metropolitan regions in China. So this urban challenge is located in the Greater Bay Area, which is one of the most important metropolitan regions. That's why it's also very interesting for governments, for businesses, and for education institutions to work together. So, first part, I would like to frame this discussion of feeding and greening and metropolitan farming in the context of Chinese rapid urbanization and green development. If we work across cultures, you will notice that people coming from different backgrounds would have actually very different perception of what your world map is. So during my study, for example, I did the live surveys of my audience, which are mostly Dutch people, with student, government, and from education, to say, what is green city to you? So we have no time today to do a survey, it will be very interesting, but you will see that when I show different pictures of green city development in China, the general rule is, when the picture, the greener it looks, people more perceive it to be green city. So this is a rendering, not a real city, but it's very green. And so most people think, yes, this is a green city. This picture, a lot of water, so blue structure, green structure, is also very important, but when it's water, you see that people don't think it's not green enough. And these two pictures, actually both from Shenzhen, so very 20 minutes from Dongguan, a mega city, that grown from a fishing village to a mega city of 70 million people in the last 30 years. So most people would say, no, this is really not green, because it's a big city. But it's a that's the audience that gave this answer. So government people, embassy, our Ministry of yeah. Oh, sorry.
High technology.
Sorry. How do I go back?
Where's the pointer?
This one? Okay. Well, for example, Shenzhen is rated the most sustainable city in China in 2018. And why is that? Because Shenzhen, by investing in green infrastructure, so public transit, bus, electric vehicles, it managed to cut down emission of carbon by 50%. And because it's so densely populated, that's why public service can be very efficient. So the basic conclusion is, we can have people mentally or conceptually do understand when you talk about green, sustainable, equal, there are many different criteria. But when you really have to ask directly to think about it, you have completely different answers. And then for China, this green development is not a utopia ideal that should look all great. But it's really reflect the challenges for a rapidly developing country in terms of infrastructure development, transport, CO2 emissions, air quality, but also for safety and trust in the society. So I show this, these are the people who actually gave those answers, surprising to them. What I also ask people is, when we talk about urbanization, cities, green, what does it mean really to you personally? So I asked mostly this audience, 70% Dutch people, what do you think yourself living in urban area, rural area, or both? So most people think them, actually 50% consider them living in rural areas, or mixed. And I asked, what do you think the urbanization rate of the Netherlands is? So this question, we also opened our session about China rapidly urbanizing from 50 to 70 in the next 5 years, 10 years. The question is, what is Netherlands actually stands in this same comparison? People knows. So no time to go into a survey, but you can see more or less it reflect the general picture. Most people consider the Netherlands to be a not so urbanized region. So 50% consider to be less than 60% urbanized. And the answer to this, and to give directly, is in the same standard. When you talk about China, it's right now 50%, going to 70%. The same standard. The Netherlands 93% urbanized. So we have a lot of green area around this. Also Wageningen for it would be considered rural area, but it's part of the urban system. So when you also mentally will talk about this importance of feeding mega and greening mega cities, since most people in the developed country, Netherlands, consider yourself living in rural area, nice green. So the question is, how much this topic of feeding other people's megacity mean to you? So the answer is, I got a very honest answer, because there's also a lot of business people there, and say, well, 30% says, I feel it personally because it impacts me, because I am one of the citizens in these megacities. So when we talk about food safety, reducing carbon footprint, it matters to me. But most people say, well, it's important, people talk about it, but for me, I'm not impacted. And a lot of, I think, business will say, well, it's just business. So we have a different audience here, young people. I think if I asked the same, I would hope that you would more thinking on to say, it's important, not just about feeding other people's cities, it's us. We are all part of this mega city urbanization movement. The challenge we face about water use, energy consumption matters to all of us. That's why we wanted to do the challenge and find a solution together. Look at drivers. If you look at the food production consumes 1/3 of total world energy use. So this includes the production, transportation, but also all the waste goes into food consumption. So if you look at all the things that go into feeding one person, it needs worldwide average 2,300 square meter per person per year to give you the protein, the seed, the potatoes, and also the fresh product. In China, this number is about 1,700 square meter, but rapidly increasing. So that also means food is increasingly transported over long distance, and not everything can be produced locally, but there's a big part, especially fresh product, can. And then to reduce food miles, but also increasing consumer trust. This is the number we've been talking about. China is urbanizing rapidly. It's going from, right now it's already at 50%, to actually less than 10 years. Even the number says China will reach 70% within 5 years. It means another 2 years. In any case, China is going to a speed, increased speed of urbanization. And it's again, this is not a process of people moving from a horizontal place to a vertical place. This urbanization stage is very important because it means improvement in infrastructure, in improving the gap, huge gap, between rural population and urban population, and also in education access, in equal opportunities, in environment. So this stage of 50 to 70% is not just about building buildings, but it's about the whole society going to a kind of new stage of development. That's why it's very important. And because of the issue of food, this is you cannot read this. This is the overview of all the government policies on agro-park development, basically to make agriculture more industrial scale with better investment. It's everywhere in China, and you can see this is a really drive coming from central government, regional government, local government. So we are here, Guangdong province. The government also invests now already 7 billion yuan, so 700 million euros or so, in the last 3 years to improve upgrading the food production facilities. And another driver, why is vegetable farming is important, is for people who know a little bit about China or do not know, you think China is very big. But China has really a severe lack of agricultural land. So if you draw a line between here and there,
Watch out for technology.
90% of people live all around the coast. That's where all the big cities are located. So there's a conflict already between urban and rural. Another big important thing to understand is this protected farmland in China. So this is a big table, don't bother with it. But basically it says China want to guarantee 100 million hectare of farmland for staple foods, for food, really food security, so quantity. So these protected farmland are not to be touched. They cannot be used for example, greenhouse production, because that's not staple foods. So that means if you look at a certain area like Beijing or Shanghai, 50% of Shanghai, for example, 3,000 square kilometers, is farmland. And most of it is protected. So that means you have some farmland that actually can be used for vitamins, vegetables, but they're very limited. So that means you must increase productivity in order to meet the needs for all the megacity populations. And also, another big driver of this 50 to 70% urbanization is the shifting of growing middle class, and not the high end. So we often heard organic food as labels for the high-end consumers, but the big driver will be coming from, not from the already the rich consumer, but from the ones coming from, let's say, the mass middle class, going into the upper middle class. So this, in China, refer to the consumption upgrade. So these are the people already meet their basic needs. They now are going to stage we want to invest more in the education, they want to have more trust in the water, food, air they breathe. So these are the consumption upgrade middle class driving changes. So if you look at also the kind of this, for people who are not in agriculture, it's a kind of quick math class about food production in cities. What does it mean? So if you look at the simple comparison of productivity between open field to, let's say, this not highest high tech, but it's already very achievable with the control environment with artificial light, you basically can increase productivity by 5 times. And with vertical system, this number even much higher, but this number is used based on technology that can be implemented by everybody. So if you look at this number, to say we have 1 billion urban consumer in China, if we just take the minimum 200 grams of fresh product, not all the vegetable consumption, but the fresh product, this would already translate into a huge amount of savings if you can increase productivity. For example, by instead of a 480,000 hectare open field, you can reduce 2/3. So we can also look at different regions. Some regions, like Greater Bay Area, simply has no farmland to produce. So you need to go up higher, you need to improve productivity, but also when you can produce close to the city, it converts to a saving of 95% water, you save, which is very important, and you save a lot of transportation movement. So also, Cindy already mentioned this issue of value chain. In China, we can also call it one driver is this trust economy. So when we talk about organic, talk about label, talking about branding, essentially you can say Chinese consumers are willing to pay for products that is authentic, with authentic story behind it, with labels. Essentially you can say people are willing to pay for trust. So because in a market you have a very big chain, value chain, from basic produce to produce that can offer, let's say, the proposition of fresh product in health, nutrition, trustworthy. So in this aspect, the Chinese rising middle class consumers are willing to pay a lot more than for your, let's say, the European counterpart. And also, if you would look at your local characteristics, what is also interesting is that this e-commerce is rapidly democratizing the consumption space. 3 years ago, you could still say it's the big consumers in big cities, or tier 1 cities we call it, was driving the consumption. But what you see is the willingness to pay between second, third tier cities in China is not that much different. So that also means you need to understand who are your consumers, who are your target users, let's say, what do they care, what drives them. There's also some of these things by it's a survey of 200 consumers last year with in Holland students. We look at also what are people willing to pay, for example, high tech, if it's imported, if it has organic label, or it has a logistic labeling. So these also contribute to consumer preference. So when we talk about urban farming value cases or business cases, very important is indeed marketing, because you want to bring your produce directly to your users. What do they conceive as their value? And that's important to understand, different social, economic background. So last few words about where we are. We already talked about urban density. So this you can see, this is where we are. In terms of urban density, the Guangzhou region, Shenzhen, Dongguan, is the highest in China. So average of the Guangdong province is about 540 persons per square meters. But in urban core, already Simon mentioned, it's about 3,000 or more. So it's extremely densified region. And in terms of background, challenges, also opportunities for design. This is a region often considered as a subtropical region, very humid, very hot in the summer especially. This also gives a number. The total Guangdong province is population, it's 210, but the density 536 overall, and this is the one where it's located, very close to. So if you look at, of course, producing, already mentioned, in the Greater Bay Area, the urbanization rate is about 83% already, so it's very already comparable with developed countries, and there's no farmland at all, actually. So we have to talk about vertical, indoor, controlled environment, but the big challenge is energy. So not going to go into detail. This is a study done by VFI to look at different products. If you can produce in different systems, and also compare it to traditional agriculture.
I'm almost going to round you off because
Yes,
all the
1 minute.
details. Yes.
Yeah, I'm done. So the one conclusion basically is that even the energy already, we have this vertical farm workshop. A big topic of indoor farming is energy. So even if you cover your building with the most efficient PV, photovoltaics, you only can able to cover 17% power demand for food production. So, and because energy is such a huge problem, if you don't solve properly also the consumer positioning, then the benefit of producing close to city will be cancelled out. Because yes, you can save transport distance, but compared to the energy use, it's still too big. But it only offers opportunity, and your cost, of course. Last sheet. So inspirations and challenges for this design competition. Understanding it's not just about producing an urban building, it's about trying to really work on edges of urban system and food production system. Understand your consumer, value proposition, and also the socio-economic drivers. What drives people? What the kind of DNA of the people in this region? And in terms of a building program, the production side is very important. Well, we're not expecting you to have become a plant physiologist, but it's important to consider that. And also consider this production in terms of other functions, that it's for public spaces, for, let's say, integrated program with cities, and also as a social gathering market and trade area. So this kind of, let's say, intangible value become an integral proposition of your marketing proposition of the urban production of food.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so actually I'm very curious because we are going to have some interaction again. There will be a panel discussion in a second. But it was mentioned already quite sometimes it's important to not only consider your construction and the plants growing there, but also the market there. So I'm curious, if you look at the whole supply chain, who sees himself or herself more on the production side and who sees themselves more on the consumption market side? So who's more on the production side? Can I see some hands? Okay, maybe the construction of the building side, the consumption side and the marketing and the trade of that. Okay, there's a quite good division in here. Who sees him or herself more as the whole supply chain coordinator, like Cindy? Okay, also quite some. So it's good to have all of these aspects on board on your team to both look at all, like in detail on the aspects, but also look at the supply chain as a whole. Now there's really going to be some time for interaction and to ask questions to both Cindy and Tiffany. But first of all, I'm going to introduce you to the moderator of the panel. The moderator is also part of the International Society for Horticultural Sciences, but he will introduce that in a second. And he's Associate Professor at Bologna University on vegetable crops and greenhouse technology. Can I have a warm welcome to Francisco Orsini?
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Well, welcome here. I'm Francesco Orsini, as presented just now. I'm also here representing the International Society for Horticultural Science. For those of you that are not aware about the society, it is a scientific society that has more than 100 years and groups together scientists, academics, but also technicians in the different fields of horticultural science. It is composed by several divisions. I'm currently chairing.
You can continue and speak
Yeah.
up just loud.
I'm currently chairing the division on landscape and urban horticulture. And from this year, the division is also supporting this challenge and promoting it among its members. Well, I suggest that we start with the interactive section now, and call Sydney and Tiffany to join me. I do have an opening question, but then I would like also to have all your questions directly addressing them. So, well, the first question, you have been also talking about quality of the produce and the perception of the consumer about the different produce. We are thinking about growing food inside cities. How do you think a certified produce would be interesting for the consumer, or do you think that different models can be adapted to plants cultivation inside cities?
Yeah, the question was about if
The
it needs to be
certification.
certificate.
Do we need to certificate a product that is
There
grown in
are
a city?
currently, I think there's a lot of certifications in the market, and people often don't really know what they stand for. So I think that actually in the end a brand would be better, a consumer brand. This is something that we hardly see in fresh produce. There's only a few branded products. In the US there are more, in Europe there are hardly any branded products. But that makes it easier for producers to really communicate with consumers, because a certificate, yeah, it's all the same still. So, and you have to tick some boxes and then you get it, but it doesn't really make a difference in the end, I think.
Okay. And I don't know if you want to add on this?
Yeah. Well, I think on for
Yeah.
in terms of food producing in the cities, I think certification is one aspect of making this whole system work. Because actually, there's no standard in the right. Actually, in the worldwide, there is no standard qua construction, qua for example, also building quality, performance, and product. How a product perceived? Who is certifying them? In food safety, it's really quite a blank page, many aspects. So also in China, for example, when you produce food in urban area, you potentially actually is subject to different tax rules and income tax. Yeah? So there's very different urban system and rural system. So in that, I think there's a real lot of topics unanswered. Also in terms of organic labeling in China, very much valued. But indoor farming products still has a challenge being organic certified. So actually, in some ways, you have to completely develop new standards for urban farming.
Test.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
I don't know. Has China similar rules compared to Europe? Do you need to produce in soil to be organically certified, or? Okay, yeah, that would
And would it be
make a
possible?
difference.
Yeah.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, the idea was actually to understand whether it would be possible to certify a production from an urban environment and from a rooftop greenhouse, or whether we should look for different business models. Is it possible to sell a product that is cultivated in such a type of growing environments into the formal
marketing systems? Or,
But would people just buy it because it's produced in an urban farm? I think in the end they still want to have a good product.
Yeah.
So the quality and the taste still needs to be fine, independent if it's produced in a greenhouse or urban farm or on the field. I think the basic needs to be all right all the time, so safe product, and on top of that the quality needs to be fine. So I think we did also a research with a student, and he interviewed, or he had a questionnaire for about 500 consumers, and he found out that the consumers did not care that much about the system. They care about the end product. That needs to be fresh, tasty, safe, all kind of things. But yeah, they did not care that much about the production system. Although if you live close to it and you can combine, you can go there and also use it as a restaurant, whatever, you can of course create additional value, but...
There is a question from the public here.
Yeah, just real quick, where did he do those surveys? Was it in China, the region that we're working, or not?
No, it was a European survey, so maybe... I think there's also been a survey
Can you
in
use the
Japan.
microphone a little bit from here? Yeah.
I think in Japan that is, for example, different because people really like the high-tech environment, produced products. But, yeah.
The survey results show you is based on Shanghai. So, but also surrounding regions. So also try to take in the fact of the tier 1, 2, 3, but mostly metropolitan region in Shanghai, so which is quite comparable to Shenzhen.
Is there any question from the public? Because I was also curious about what. Oh, okay, well then.
No, I don't microphone.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, can you actually combine the social side of an urban farm and a really high technical level of production? Because in my opinion, those two are, if you have a really high production, then you're working with other players in the market, and you have a social role where people gather. They're two completely different markets, ways of working. I don't think it's possible to combine them. I'm just curious what the panel thinks.
Yeah, so, well, I will repeat the question so it's on the microphone and everyone else can hear from home. And so the idea is whether you can combine high technology system with the social function that urban agriculture can have.
I think, yeah, that's actually the part, it's for sure possible, because I think where also in the context China, that especially Dongguan, for example, you know, a little background of it, it's famous for being a major production center, so very adventurous region. So now the whole, on the overall government positioning is don't want to be transitioning into a high-tech region. So that's why agriculture for China, modern agriculture for China is very important, very interesting, because precisely combines that high-tech with, let's say, traditional sector. So in terms of consumer preference, though, the mental map, though, yes, you're right. Actually, you can say, well, consumer have maybe a romantic feeling of, okay, that produce need to be coming from soil with sun, and then not this stacked up system, never see sunlight. But that's actually, you can also, that's where the marketing and branding aspect do play a big role, because in the end, consumers still pay for product with trust to the quality. That can be, that actually high-tech production guarantees that you can reduce pesticide, you can have a controlled environment, but you want to market to your consumers that it's romantic, it's, you know, other value proposition. So that's a combination of very good production, knowledge input, combining with the, let's say, understanding consumer psychic.
I think, yeah, you can combine, but it's a different business model, yeah, from producing more efficiently and massively, I think. But yeah, I think it's a major challenge, I think, to combine both worlds. I have not seen currently any companies doing this. But
What do you think might be the role of the urban resources into the sustainability of the system? Thinking about rainwater collection or energy?
So also in my presentation, I framed the farming discussion in the green city, and then indeed I think food, energy, water. So also understanding that in the context, for example, smart cities, in the Shenzhen, the Great Bay Area has a monsoon season, meaning that there's a lot of water falls one time and then very dry period. So in the end, big cities has no water. Despite an actual flooding problem, that's why Spawn City comes in, because to solve this urban flooding when it's all completely paved environment. So green roof, the greening part, urban farming, the energy management, but also especially water. How does that work in the system? It should be one integral approach.
That makes it actually also interesting that there's now a lot of people from Wageningen University, but there are students from all around the world and also all around the Netherlands joining in this challenge. And there's also other technical universities that are working more on energy or on other systems. So it's also possible to make combinations of teams with students from other universities. So also take a look at your bigger network outside of Wageningen if you have friends from Delft or Eindhoven or Enschede maybe.
Well, and how do you think this greenhouse should meet the needs of the increasing middle class that we see from your charts? So what type of crops or services do you think would be most interesting for the local population? Yeah.
I think it's a typical question.
So if you look at the local for local, I think it's also addressed a little bigger. I don't believe urban farming, the stack-up system is the solution, or the only solution. So also in my research, and I looked at also the traditional large-scale production system, because local China is bigger than whole Europe, but if you produce in Sichuan, you transport to Shenzhen, is that local? How do you define local? Is it defined by a ministry boundary, by trade barrier, or by distance, or by, what is it? So in that sense, I think for China, if you look at the greenhouse structures, I think there are room for increasing knowledge and developing the new generation of entrepreneurs and farmers, and providing supporting infrastructure in financing, in innovative capacity. I think that's a more meaningful topic to discuss than, well, I would say equally important topic to discuss compared to discussing different technical systems. Because you need, I think for a country like China, you need actually also space for all different kind of systems, low tech, mid tech, high tech, vertical, integrated function, or pure production. But in the end, of course, it comes down to local circumstances, what is some business model, and then it's typical.
Thank you.
There's a question over here.
Yes.
Just a question for Cindy, coming from a bank. Maybe you could tell us something about the value proposition of an urban greenhouse that is going beyond the food that is produced in that greenhouse, and how that would or should affect the design that could optimize the other additional values beside the food itself. Does that question make sense, or was I?
Yeah, if I understand correctly. Currently, the value proposition of urban farms or vertical farms is really difficult for us as a bank. So we have a few clients that do vertical farming, but most of them are in breeding or propagation. So yeah, for them it's more an R&D expenditure. So it's a different business model. We have a few clients that are financed by investors that do vertical farming, but the business model is still extremely difficult. There are some companies that have a vertical farm with restaurants or things like that. So it's more of a, I don't want to say a gimmick, a nice gimmick of the restaurant to have a vertical farm. But yeah, you make more money, they make more money currently, but the restaurant or the other products they sell or services than with the actual farming. And that remains, I think, really a challenge, because if you really want to make money on the food, you still compete on a market that is fairly commoditized, unless you have very specific niche products that sell at a high value, certain herbs or, but it's difficult.
Can I ask this a little bit more specific? I come from Denver in the US. We have developers that are willing to pay for greenhouses on top of new developments because it increases the value of the rest of the properties around, giving those greenhouses for free to growers so that they grow in those greenhouses. So the value proposition is not anymore the food that you're growing, it is the building and what you're doing in the building that actually provides value far beyond whatever the lettuce is that you're growing or the tomatoes. And so that's why I was asking. That does make a difference in the design, because one of the things that developers were looking forward to, not that we necessarily all agree, is the pink hue at night that is bringing people in. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's what they wanted, so that people would know, oh, here's food grown, we want to go there. In addition, the reason to do this was to be able to sell local produce in this area, which creates sales tax for the cities in areas that are otherwise abandoned. So that's another value that was added. So I just wanted to throw that out for teams to consider, because it's more than just growing food.
Yeah, maybe you should consider to have a rooftop farm without any covers. That makes the area even greener and more attractive. Just a rooftop farm, I don't know if it's about the property value. And that has been proven, yeah, that it can really increase property value.
Well, I think with this the discussion is over, and yeah, and I will give back to you for the closures.
Well, indeed, the discussion is over, but it's not over. It's over for now, but it's not over for the whole general discussion, of course, because it's just a start. We're here together. There will be lunch in a second, but we're here together to continue this conversation and to see what opportunities there are for this whole building in the city. We're going to go to the official opening of this, and we're here with all these super important people on stage, but I also saw in the beginning that there are quite some people who already registered for a team, and now I would like, because for the official opening there will be a group picture afterwards. I don't think that we will fit with all 100 in the group picture, but can I have some team representatives, some very photogenic people to the front? Who is going to represent each team? Can I invite all of you to the front, and then we're moving to the official part of this opening. This is directly a good start for you as a team to get to know each other better. And also, everybody, I just heard there are some people online joining. Send some virtual love to us, that you're present with us. Well, if these are all the representatives of all the teams, there's already many, many teams up here. I'm going to everybody on it? Okay, yes.
So you're working on China. I'll teach you the, well, speak Chinese yet. The first Chinese words, this ceremony. In China we call it 鸣锣开道. So
let's repeat.
repeat. 鸣锣开道. That means, so 鸣锣 means when old times, in the emperor times, important people like emperor or high officials, when they're going into the villages, there will be some person, guy, guard, whatever, knocking on a smaller one to open up the road. So notify that here we come. So this is ceremony now. We notify to the world, here we come, right?
Here we come. I think we're gonna count down. Are you ready to bring the urban farm to the next level? Let's count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We invite you all to come for lunch. Let's make one last group picture and let's go for a lunch all together. One more. We invite all of you to join lunch in the spot, so downstairs area, and connect, find your last partners for your team, connect with the jury members or with the coaches all around. Enjoy the challenge.